Tonight on this NewsWatch Special Report.
After all we have been through together, we stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history.
Less than 100 days since retaking office, President Donald Trump's policies are reshaping life here in Southeast Ohio.
The loss of any federal funding for any area of the state is going to be devastating.
From orders to dismantle the Department of Education.
In times like this, we do have to come together, think about what's best for students.
To cuts at the Department of Agriculture.
I guess if anybody wants to understand the importance of food assistance, try and skip breakfast and lunch, and see how you feel.
Plus, a growing trade war has the agriculture industry worried. But there's another problem.
Put down the weapons and work together on a farm bill.
And
they get 100% of their aluminum cans, glass bottles, whatever, from Canada and other places overseas.
How tariffs on the U.S. and its trade partners are impacting local businesses and how they're preparing in a new, unpredictable world.
This NewsWatch Special Report starts right now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Donovan Varney.
And I'm Morgan Anderson. It's day 91 of President Trump's second term, and his administration has made major changes to the federal government.
On everything from immigration, manufacturing, and healthcare, the president has wasted no time making his priorities clear.
During his inauguration, Trump said his actions will help usher in a new golden age for America.
After all we have been through together, we stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. With your help, we will restore America's promise, and we will rebuild the nation that we love.
But the start to Trump's second term has created a sense of uncertainty.
That's a word you'll hear a lot tonight, but one thing is for sure. Federal policy is shaping laws here in the state, and that's where we want to start.
President Trump signed an executive order encouraging states to move toward private education, something Ohio has been doing for years now.
NewsWatch reporter Allison Patton joins us live from Athens Middle School with details on what this means for public education. Allison?
The Ohio proposed state budget gives private schools $500 million over the next 2 years and gives public schools $226 million. And while that may sound like a lot for public schools, that's actually not nearly enough to properly fund public schools across the state. And that's because Ohio calculates how much a school district should be able to contribute through taxes and levies. Then the state funds the rest. It's called the Fair School Funding Plan. But public school advocates say the formula is flawed because it doesn't use the most recently available operational cost of the district, leading to underfunding. To make up the difference, districts then have to go to voters to pass a levy. But taxpayers are becoming more and more reluctant to pass levies because of the recent jump in property taxes. And that's why many school districts are ending the year in a budget deficit, and they're having to cut costs wherever they can. FedHawk had to cut 7 teacher positions last month to stay out of a $300,000 budget deficit. Trimble is in fiscal emergency. That's largely because they failed to pay their own bills. Situations like this are happening all over the state, not just in Southeast Ohio. Policy Matters Ohio, a public school advocate agency, says using the 2024 operational cost information of districts instead of information from 2022 in the Fair School Funding Plan would give the schools the money they need. But legislatures say that would mean the state would have to pay out billions of dollars more.
Even fiscal year, if we go to fiscal year 24, it's going to be another $1 billion in school funding that we're going to have to come up with.
Some lawmakers say using taxpayer money to expand alternatives to public schools give parents more choices. Representative Kevin Ritter says the state's initiatives will help the market and even foster competition.
What we know about competition is it typically gives us a better product. So I would argue that the Ed Choice program is making public schools even better. It's forcing them to compete.
Public school advocates say the proposed budget bill completely scraps the Fair School Funding Plan.
It goes back to a model where we're funding schools based on what the legislature feels like funding them.
Public school advocates also say this new funding strategy shortfalls schools by billions of dollars over the next budget cycle. Reporting for NewsWatch, I'm Allison Patton, live in Athens.
Thanks, Allison. Libraries across Southeast Ohio also face challenges after recent cuts to state and federal funding. Some of the money that is frozen are grants from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, or IMLS. The Athens County Public Library says the loss of those funds will impact the library's digital services like ebooks and audiobooks, as well as plans to expand a program to place pickup lockers in communities. Officials say the cut also puts plans to expand its Chansey location on hold.
We had a lot of hope for this most recent grant that we put in for, but indications are that that grant is going to not be unfrozen.
County public libraries are unsure about the future of their federal funding, and as budget cuts continue, libraries are responsible for finding money to support their needs.
Meanwhile, the Trump administration has taken aim at reforming education from a student's first day to graduation. NewsWatch reporter Noah Cavan has the latest on the president's recent moves and what they could mean for local educators.
Donovan, school districts across Southeast Ohio brace for a massive loss in funding after recent moves by the Trump administration. Perhaps the most impactful, dismantling the Department of Education.
Who would fathom that we would shut down the Department of Education? It's been a support for education for so many years.
Dr. Tina McWilliams, Director of Special Services with the Athens Local School District, says her thoughts are shared by many educators across the country. The Department of Education provides schools with a lot of funding. This includes Title I funds, which go to school districts with a high percentage of low-income students, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA, which guarantees a free education to students with disabilities, and federal student aid, which provides financial assistance to college students in the form of loans or grants. Here in Ohio, on average, 10% of a school district's annual budget comes from federal funding, but in rural or low-income areas, that number can more than double to around 25%. Education advocates say these cuts could hit smaller communities the hardest.
With the struggles that the state of Ohio has had trying to implement a fair school funding plan, the loss of any federal funding for any area of the state is going to be devastating.
Tim Johnson, senior policy advocate at the Ohio Poverty Law Center, says the loss of funding could restrict schools' access to resources vital to academic success.
Students who live in poverty are already facing tremendous roadblocks, tremendous hurdles. I think what you will see is just a continued loss of services, a continued loss of programming in those schools that other schools that have more wealth will be able to keep. And it's just going to contribute to the never-ending cycle of poverty that a lot of families see themselves trapped in.
Students with disabilities are guaranteed a free education meeting their specialized needs by law. However, the loss of the IDEA makes it difficult for schools to meet these needs.
IDEA funding, as well as Title I funding, is directly tied to supplies, resources for special education, and salaries and benefits for specialized instruction. If we lose the funding, we are still responsible to meet the guidelines explained in those IEPs.
The future of federal student aid becomes uncertain as the Department of Education begins to be dismantled.
That creates uncertainty for some students who may be looking at college knowing that that source of funding was there and that it might not be. Just makes things so much more harder for those families.
These three key components of the Department of Education will be moved to other bureaus, but it's unsure if the support will continue. But one thing is certain despite all of these uncertainties.
In times like this, we do have to come together, think about what's best for students, because at the end of the day, we are here for the students.
Now, just hours ago, the Department of Education announced it is restarting forced repayments on federal student loans that were paused in 2020. An estimated 5.3 million borrowers are affected by this move. Those affected will be notified within the next 2 weeks. The Trump administration has not set a timeline for the dismantling of the Department of Education as states around the country fight the move. Reporting for NewsWatch, I'm Noah Cavan, live in studio.
Thanks, Noah. The White House has also taken aim at diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at universities across the country, threatening to cut federal funding if these programs aren't eliminated. This, coupled with a new Ohio law banning DEI initiatives, is leaving students and faculty unsure of what's next. NewsWatch reporter Reese Thompson is live at College Green with more. Reese, what are people telling you tonight?
Donovan, Senate Bill 1 has the power to reshape higher education in Ohio. But still, students and staff here at Ohio University say they're unsure how this legislation applies to them. The unknown future of DEI centers is causing turmoil among Ohio University students and staff.
The lack of answers has honestly hurt my feelings. I love this university a lot, and I feel like at least with all the things that I love about the university, I would hope that they would be honest and transparent.
Mia Walsh is a student contemplating her career after the bill passed. Walsh wanted to continue working at the Pride Center after graduation, but changed her post-graduation plans, speculating her job will be eliminated.
Fortunately, unfortunately, have fallen in love with working with the specific population of queer students, so LGBT students, and you can't really do that in the state of Ohio anymore because of Senate Bill 1. And so I'm now looking for jobs at universities in other states.
OU President Lori Gonzalez sent out 2 letters responding to student questions about the legislation, saying the university is working to fully understand how Senate Bill 1 changes the future of the school. Some students still feel the letters didn't answer their questions.
Uncertainty is definitely a good word for it, just because the university hasn't told us much. And so
Gwen Ellers is a women gender studies major, one of the programs at risk of elimination under Senate Bill 1 if it doesn't produce enough graduates. Ellers says the letters did not give any clarity for students in similar positions.
in a bunch of my classes, once she did give that statement, we were calling it a non-statement statement.
While students grapple with the new law, Ohio University chapter of American Association of University Professors President John O'Keefe says they plan to negotiate with the university to keep professors with jeopardized jobs.
There are people who are definitely really determined to teach here as long as they can.
Now there's speculation that the university will vacate the DEI centers over the summer. WOUB reached out to ask if this is true, but did not hear back. Reporting for NewsWatch, I'm Reese Thompson, live in Athens.
Thanks, Reese. NewsWatch is your source for news impacting Southeast Ohio. For more on these stories and the latest news across the region, follow us on Instagram and X at NewsWatch_WOUB. Turning now to the federal funding freeze, key programs helping low-income families and children in Southeast Ohio could take a hit.
NewsWatch reporter Harshita Singhania looks at one program helping students in and outside the classroom that could face disruption because of funding cuts.
For Justine Moffitt, Head Start is more than just an early education program for kids. She went through the program herself as a kid, and now her children are doing the same. She's also actively involved in the Parent Policy Council.
Kids have grown so much. And I don't think that if it weren't for this program, they would have grown. I can do so much as a parent.
Justine is worried what might happen if federal funding for the 6-decade-old program falls through, and she's not alone.
This kind of services, if they're gone after 60 years, if this ends, I don't see anything able to replace them.
Head Start serves 254 children across Hawking, Athens, and Perry counties, offering more than just learning. It offers meals, dental screenings, home visits, and more to low-income families.
They don't have all the food that they need, and this is where they eat.
HAPCAP Director for Child Development Programs, Chris Del Marte, says earlier this year, the program came dangerously close to losing nearly $6 million in federal funding.
Just a couple months ago, we were in a position where our funding was frozen, and we were going to have to lay off everybody and close our doors. And fortunately, that was averted.
But with no guarantees for the future, staff and families are preparing for the worst while hoping support does not run out.
I mean, that's all we can do is keep fighting and keep sending letters, keep expressing how important Head Start is, and until they tell us to stop, we're not going to stop.
Reporting for NewsWatch, I'm Harshita Singhania in Athens.
Healthcare for millions of people is also on the federal chopping block.
In Ohio, over 3 million people are enrolled in Medicaid, and over 85,000 of them are Southeast Ohio residents. But proposed changes could see Ohio pulling back on its support of Medicaid. With the Trump administration looking to cut $880 billion from the federal budget, some cuts to Medicaid could happen. Governor Mike DeWine's budget proposal for the state through 2027 includes a trigger law if matched federal funding falls below 90%. That law would end coverage for those who received it under a Medicare expansion in 2014.
Not covered by Medicaid prior to the expansion. That was a huge, huge bonus for this area. The other thing is that many people do work. However, they don't make enough money to really support themselves, so they also just depend on the Medicaid.
No changes have been made with federal Medicaid funding for Ohio yet. For more in-depth coverage on these stories and more, we'll take you beyond the broadcast with WOUB's news podcast, The Outlet, where you can find the latest national headlines made local. The Outlet is available wherever you get your podcasts, or you can listen online at WOUB.org. Agriculture is one of the many industries being hit hard by tariffs in a growing trade war. But there's more issues within ag that have farmers worried for the future. Let's break it down. Starting in 2018, during President Trump's first term, Congress passed the current Farm Bill, which guarantees federal policy to support farmers, and it's meant to be updated every 5 years. It handles everything from crop insurance and emergency relief funds to new product development and finding new trade partners. Let's flash forward to 19. Ohio saw its wettest spring on record, delaying planting. By spring 2020, the pandemic hit. Consumers rushed to stores, emptying shelves and putting a strain on the supply chain. In 2021, global trade is disrupted again as war begins in Ukraine. Then a year later, in 2022, input costs and inflation reached record high numbers. Meanwhile, Congress was unable to act, leaving the 2018 Farm Bill to expire in 2023. Congress passed a one-year extension, which was renewed again last year in 2024. Meanwhile, Ohio lost over 200,000 acres of farmland and 1,800 farms closed. That brings us to today. A bird flu sweeps through Ohio's poultry farms, egg prices have hit a record high, and on and off tariffs leave the markets in limbo. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking in Washington, where on September 30th, one of the most important pieces of legislation in American agriculture is set to expire. And if it does, some producers say their livelihood's at risk.
It's the duty of our government to, keep things up to date. Let's make things reflect the reality of the situations that we are in.
Tyler Dravis is an Ohio farmer and president of the Ohio Corn and Wheat Growers Association. He says a federal farm bill is important to keep farmers afloat, especially in Ohio.
We're kind of taking it on the chin. We're coming off of here specifically in Ohio, kind of a tougher growing season where we had volatile weather patterns, where too much rain in some part of the states and dry in others, led to lower yields across the state overall, faced with higher input prices as well. Couple that with the lower commodity prices, we're kind of in a spot where it's a little tough out here. A farm bill would give us that certainty.
Without a new farm bill or an extension of the most current one, federal policy hops in a time machine.
It would be like if our industry or the airline industry and the airline industry went back to the 1930s or 1940s.
For dairy farmers, products will have to be sold at the market value of milk from 1910 to 1914. Something dairy farmer Joel Steiner says could cost him everything.
If the farm bill would be cut at some point and the years that are really bad that we need support, you just get to a point you can't pay your bills.
And as farmers wait to see what happens in Washington, the industry remains optimistic.
I believe if we're not changing with the times, we're dying on the vine, so to speak. I have the utmost confidence that our leadership understands the necessity for that and the components that need to make that happen.
America's wisest pursuit, fighting to survive in the 21st century. Congress can extend the current farm bill or let it expire. And while farmers wait, the demands of the industry does not, nor does the new administration.
That's right. President Trump directed the U.S. Department of Agriculture to cut a $500 million program that helps food banks purchase food from local farmers and food processors. That program is called the Local Food Purchase Assistance Cooperative Agreement, or LFPA for short. And losing the LFPA means less food in food banks, less money to farmers and food processors, and ultimately less food for those in need. There are 12 regional food banks in Ohio. One is the Southeast Ohio Food Bank. Between them, over $26 million are split and allocated towards Ohio's LFPA program. connecting food banks with local farmers and processors. And now, the money is gone.
The amount of food that we get from these federal food programs is the largest source that we get and has been for years and years.
That's Eva Bloom with Hocking Athens Perry Community Action, a local nonprofit that works in tandem with the Southeast Ohio Food Bank. Bloom says just last year, they distributed over 220,000 pounds of food from the LFPA, helping over 61,000 individuals. And without the funds,
they're going to get less. They're going to get less each time they visit. There's just no other way of coping with that problem.
That could mean 1 or 2 less cans of food per person, and Bloom says the demand at the food bank is up 20% from 2022.
We've been seeing this really high demand for assistance. We haven't seen the same level of food coming into our doors to be able to supply out to them.
But Bloom says the solution isn't as simple as people may think.
We cannot solve this just by everybody, writing an additional $25 check. The amount of support that we get through this program is significant.
With no money to buy local products, the farmers and distributors are taking a financial hit.
It was a big relief, to have something like that. So I do think programs like this are a really big deal for newer up-and-coming farmers.
Stephen Fowler, a chicken farmer in Logan, was able to get his business started thanks to the LFPA. The guaranteed sales to the food bank gave his business a healthy boost.
It was really handy as an entrepreneur trying to grow a business because when you start parting out chickens, you have some pieces that go really fast, like chicken breasts, but something like chicken drumsticks sell more slowly. So it gave me a little bit better cash flow or improved financial stability.
For the past 2 years, that money also supported a dairy distributor in Pomeroy called Snowville Creamery. CEO Anna Shields says it kept them on their feet.
When you talk about what it meant to us to get this money, there's myself and many others that were out there that were literally moved to tears. From a professional sense, we knew that we had to secure something big to keep us alive.
Shields says the sales represented 10% of their income and allowed them to fully staff their team and provide them benefits. Now, she isn't sure just how things might look for Snowville or farmers and food banks alike, but she is hopeful.
So you're going to be able to go to multiple producers and multiple food bank pantries, and we're all going to be telling you the same story. If the intention is to make a stronger community, what a beautiful problem for us to solve together, right?
The Trump administration and Congress plan to cut trillions of dollars of federal funding, putting crucial programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program on the chopping block. NewsWatch reporter Alex Mwale joins us now with more. Alex, how will this affect families in our area?
Yeah, Donovan, if SNAP benefits are cut, food banks are anticipating a greater need for their services. But if that need grows too high, the Southeast Ohio Food Bank might have to limit its impact.
Really Not is on a fixed income, and high prices at the grocery store force her to come here.
It helps us get through the month.
To the Southeast Ohio Food Bank Mini Mobile Market.
Anything like this helps.
She goes 2 to 3 times a month because her SNAP benefits don't cover the bill.
It's $74, that's it.
A month?
Okay. And that's nowhere near enough for 2 people.
She's feeding herself and her son, but the SNAP benefits she has could shrink if Congress cuts trillions of dollars in federal spending. About $230 billion could be taken from the SNAP program. And if they can't get enough from the grocery store, Southeast Ohio Food Bank's Eva Bloom says they'll come to the already stretched food bank. And that could have side effects.
Likely the first thing that would happen, and has been happening to some degree in our pantry network, is a reduction of the amount of food an individual receives each time they visit.
Bloom says the strong need from families like Knott's comes from inflation.
When we look at our own grocery bills compared with 2 to 3 years ago, so families, especially those living with lower incomes, have been facing a lot of financial pressures.
These pressures are avoidable, according to Ohio University economics professor Roberto Duncan.
To cut all those benefits, like the ones that you mentioned, it would be actually counterintuitive.
The federal budget still has a long way to go, and things could change by the time it's passed. Reporting for NewsWatch, I'm Alex Mwale, live in studio.
Thanks, Alex. President Trump's tariffs have meant one thing for small businesses: uncertainty, especially for traditional suppliers and consumers of Ohio craft beers.
NewsWatch reporter Charlie Ihlenfeld has more from outside on a local brewery.
Donovan and Morgan, brewers have been left with more questions than answers as tariffs on key goods continue. The largest question being, can we survive with the odds stacked against us?
I think it's more about feelings of uneasiness in the market.
Arthur Ostrich has owned Jackie O since 2008, weathering the Great Recession and the COVID-19 pandemic. But even he would say these circumstances are unique.
The trickle down, right? Like every move is affected in different ways. Every action has a reaction.
Tariffs on steel and aluminum are already impacting the brewery.
The cost of that aluminum is up. It showed about 17% up on our first truck that we received.
All of this means the company's long-term plans are going up in smoke.
Raspberry wheat, that beer, we typically run it, for 4 to 6 months every year. And the retailers of Ohio are expecting us to bring out this new product this July, but if the pricing of aluminum continues to rise or even stays where it is, pulling back on how many different offerings we have, is something that's very, very possible.
While Jackie O's is worried about tariffs on aluminum, over at Devil's Kettle, their owner is worried about the effect of tariffs on European products and how they will have an impact on his company as a whole.
That could really cut into the already small profit margins in craft brewing. Online, it's pretty doom and gloom out there in the craft beer industry right now.
Fuller is not sure he will be able to keep his prices at their current level.
Use a decent percentage of European grown malts, but if those prices go up, I'll just have to see if I could eat the costs. If not, I'll have to consider raising prices.
Despite the uncertain outlook, Fuller and Ostrich both say there's a silver lining for Athens County breweries.
It seems like the other breweries in town have all been good. Even a couple of nano breweries on the outskirts of Athens seem to be surviving.
Ostrich says the business landscape is constantly changing, and he is continuing to adapt with the market. Reporting for NewsWatch, I'm Charlie Ihlenfeld, live in Athens.
Thanks, Charlie. Since Trump took office, 300,000 people have been laid off at government agencies, and more cuts are on the way.
NewsWatch reporter Ty Carpenter spoke to some students who are also feeling the impact.
Hunter Person, a political science student at Ohio University, was offered an internship with the U.S. Department of State in early January, just days before President Trump took office. Just 2 months later, because of President Trump's cuts to the federal workforce, the offer was rescinded. And with that, Person's hope of a possible full-time job at the State Department vanished.
I'm kind of scrambling at the moment to figure out what I would like to do.
While Person lost his internship, others like Hannah Milcarek, a senior student at Ohio University, lost their chance at a full-time government job. Milcarek was hired as a probationary worker by the National Wildlife Refuge System and set to be hired full-time before suddenly being laid off.
My bosses didn't want to lose me. Everybody at Fish and Wildlife Service was really amazing and kind to me. It was none of them that made this decision. The people being affected by this, they're not the ones who want this to happen, especially in conservation. We just need people, and there was already a lack of people to begin with.
For Milcarek, who is one of many federal probationary employees initially laid off but then rehired, the situation has her rethinking her long-term career plans.
I'm a little hesitant right now because I'm a little bit worried that it's just going to happen again. With the probationary status, it's like they reserve the right to lay you off, fire you for really any reason.
Harrison Shoup is also rethinking his career plans after being told they could not be rehired as an intern after his term expired this month.
The federal government or the state government was the kind of the goal, and so now I'm looking at private maybe things and elsewhere local government things that it's really shaky with the federal government.
But even with the uncertainty, students say they'll keep an eye out as the budget is resolved.
I think in September the new budget gets passed, so that'll decide a lot of how the internships are going to be funded and stuff like that. Maybe in September things will be more back on track, more normal than they have been.
Thanks, Ty. Well, that does it for our special report. Thanks for watching.
More coverage on these stories can be found on our website, WOUB.org. Have a great night.